Welcome to The Debrief, where we talk with the Washington Examiner's top journalists about the headlines they're covering this week and where the story's going next. I'm Sarah Westwood, and I'm here today with Editor-in-Chief Hugo Gurdon. And Hugo, you wrote a column this week drawing parallels between failed Virginia Democrat Terry McAuliffe and New York Governor Kathy Hochul. What are the similarities that you see between these two blue state governor races?
Well, there was an extraordinary parallel that Kathy Hochul inadvertently made with the race that the Republican won and the favored Democrat lost a year ago in Virginia. When Lee Zeldin, her Republican challenger, pointed out that she had not talked about locking up criminals for their crimes. Crime has been one of the biggest issues in New York. I mean, just in New York City, robbery is up 38%, grand larceny 35%, burglary 33%. And it's across the state. It's extremely a matter of extreme concern to voters. And when Lee Zeldin said, we haven't heard the governor talk about locking up criminals, her response was, I don't know why that's so important to you, which was an extraordinary thing to say, because one of the things that it said, it's important to Lee Zeldin, who is my challenger, and just as it's important to voters, it's not important to me. And she was saying, I don't understand, which is not a way of convincing voters that you've got your finger on the pulse. And it was basically implying that she hadn't been listening to what voters had been screaming about for a past year. And that reminded me very strongly of the McAuliffe-Youngkin debate, where Virginia voters a year ago were enraged by the racial and gender indoctrination of children at schools, also, of course, the closing of some schools because of COVID, but enraged at what was in the curriculum. And there was a question about it in the debate, and McAuliffe said, I don't think parents should be telling teachers, schools what to teach their children. And it was just like, it dropped like a brick into the campaign. And Youngkin's campaign was able to roll the tape again and again and again in campaign ads, and it was probably what made put Youngkin over the top and defeated the Democrat who had been the favored candidate. Virginia is a blue state. New York is a blue state. Kathy Hochul, as I was saying in my piece, seems to have learned from McAuliffe how a Democrat can lose a blue state.
Yeah, and Zeldin seems to be learning from Youngkin how to win one, running,
right.
Sort of a very focused, disciplined, single-issue campaign about crime.
Yeah, actually, just one thing to say about that. I think that a number of Democrats have been focusing on the local issues. I think Dr. Oz has been doing that in Pennsylvania, for example, and a number of Republicans have not been distracted by any kind of national idea, but have been focused on local politics.
Yeah, let's move on to the Senate. In Georgia, you have a very strong gubernatorial candidate in current Governor Brian Kemp on the Republican side. You have this sort of weaker candidate, Republican candidate in that race in Herschel Walker in the Senate race, but Kemp's strength might be enough to pull Herschel Walker over the finish line. And you have sort of the inverse dynamic in Pennsylvania, where you have a very weak candidate in the governor's race on the Republican side in Doug Mastriano, and he could sort of drag Dr. Oz down with him in the Senate race.
Right.
How important do you think these coattails will be in the governor's and Senate races?
I think that Brian Kemp's evident strength and the fact that actually Stacey Abrams is a very poor candidate and has been for a number of election cycles. And she's been valorized by the Democrats. They've invested an enormous amount in her, and there must be buyer's remorse in the Democratic Party at having put so much faith in in her false claims of election denial and disenfranchisement, etc. in Georgia. And she's being beaten soundly, I think now by double digits by Brian Kemp. That could easily have a benefit to Herschel Walker, who is a questionable candidate and not nearly as polished a politician as Raphael Warnock. The drift in Georgia is certainly with the Republicans, and it may help the Republicans flip that seat, now Democrat, back to being Republican, which it was sort of fairly consistently before Warnock came in on basically he got in because of the mess that Donald Trump made of that election. You're right. In Pennsylvania, Doug Mastriano is a weak candidate, another Trump candidate, and he's probably going to be beaten soundly by the Democrat, and that could gin up enough Democrats to vote that, that could actually help defeat Dr. Oz, Mehmet Oz. That's obviously something that we have to, it might boost the vote for John Fetterman that would not have been there if people were simply looking at John Fetterman's policies and his sad and stumbling debate performance just a week ago.
Yeah, and then you also have, Kari Lake in Arizona, potentially strong enough in that race, and Katie Hobbs, weak enough to get Blake Masters over the edge in that Senate race.
Yeah, that's right. That's Kari Lake is very, very kind of polished. No matter what one thinks of her actual views, she's very good on TV. She's very assured, and looks likely to win that race, and that could help Blake Masters, who has always been trailing Mark Kelly, but actually that gap has narrowed very considerably. I mean, I think that all across there are a few key races that one will have to watch, and I mean, one of the things that I'll be watching, I think actually in some ways this is almost the most important race. It's in the Pennsylvania, Fetterman, Mehmet Oz. If the Republicans can keep Pennsylvania, then they seem to me almost assured of winning the Senate. If they keep that, it looks like they're going to win Nevada. There's a pretty decent chance of them now with Herschel Walker against winning Georgia, which could move them to 52-48 in the Senate.
So on election night, one of the races you'll be watching, Pennsylvania. Are there any others, on the East Coast, those early polls when they close, that you'll be watching that will tell you if Republicans are doing well or headed for that red wave?
Well, certainly, I mean, this is the governor's race. I think the New York race, if there's any indication that Lee Zeldin is going to beat Kathy Hochul, then I think that it's going to be a very long and disappointing night for the Democrats. The Pennsylvania race is a big one. The Georgia race is a big one. It's pretty clear that down in Florida, the Republicans are across the board are going to win. But to look at the margins there, I mean, the recent poll numbers that came out showing that suburban women had moved in huge numbers away from the Democrats to the Republicans. I mean, I think one would want to look at those kinds of margins all up and down the very populated Atlantic coast for indications.
Well, Hugo, thank you so much for being
Thank
here
you.
today. You can get more writing from Hugo and the rest of the commentary team at washingtonexaminer.com.